Welcome to the Truman Charities podcast. I am Jamie Truman, your host. What if I told you that tonight in your town, children are falling asleep on cold, hard floors, not because of neglect, but because their families simply don't have beds? Today's episode, our guest is Luke Mickelson, the founder of Sleep and Heavenly Peace, an organization that started with one bed built in a small Idaho garage and has since grown into a global movement with hundreds of chapters and thousands of volunteers. Today, Luke takes us back to the exact moment his eyes were open to a problem that he never knew existed. Children in his own community sleeping on hardwood floors. What followed was a chain of tiny moments that led to a nonprofit spanning 47 states and multiple countries, and is still growing. You'll hear heartfelt stories of families in crisis, foster siblings nearly separated over a single missing bed, and the powerful realization that a bed is never just a bed. It's stability, it's dignity, it's sleep, safety, and the chance for a child to thrive. Now, before we get into this episode, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast. We are a 100% volunteer-based organization, and these reviews really do help grow our podcast. Okay, so now let's welcome Luke to Truman Charities. So Luke, you're a guy that comes from, a small town in Idaho. And in 2012, you decided to create this organization, Sleep and Heavenly Peace. So I wanted to know, what was the moment that kind of opened your eyes to the issue of children not having beds?
Well, there's a number of moments. When I first heard about it, I was sitting in a meeting with church leaders. I was a leader over the young men's program of my church, and they talked about a family that they were helping in my small community. I mean, it was a family that I knew the mom a little bit. She was like the school bus driver, and dad, I didn't know him very well. But, the weird thing is they lived in a part of the town I didn't even know existed. And I'm from a small town. That's hard to do, and so it kind of caught my ear rather. And I thought, where's this place at? And then they started talking about the things that they were helping the family with, right? Food and rides and all sorts of stuff. Well, one of the leaders that had visited the home said, well, yeah, and the kids don't have any beds. And I said, well, it just struck me weird. I'm like, wait a minute, what? They don't have any beds? Like, certainly they've got a mattress or something. They're like, no, they're literally sleeping on the hardwood floor. And I don't know, Jamie, it just really hit me like, is that even a thing? Like, really? We got people and kids in our day and age now that don't have beds? And so that was like my first introduction to it. And I didn't know how bad the problem was. This is the only family I'd ever heard that had kids sleeping on the floor. And, as the story goes, me and the Boy Scouts built a bed for these kids. And so I didn't get to go on the delivery. Kind of a long story. I had to stay back and clean my garage because it was a mess after building it. So the next day at church, after they delivered the bed, I just heard the great stories of them building or delivering this bed to this child and seeing the joy. And I felt pretty jealous, right? I kind of missed out on a great opportunity. So I wanted to experience that for myself, but more importantly, I wanted my kids to understand and experience the joy of service and giving back, as well as appreciate the things they had. So I built another bed. And this time I was able to do the delivery, but I didn't know where to deliver it to. I didn't know any other kids that were sleeping on the floor, right? So here I had this bed that me and my kids built, and sitting in my garage, not knowing what to do with it. And someone recommended that I throw on Facebook, and like one of those buy sell trade groups, So I was like, sure, why not? And although I was a little worried putting free stuff on buy, sell, trade, yeah. The kind of comments you're going to get. Well, what blew me away, Jamie, was there were people I didn't know, people I knew. They were sending in stories of kids sleeping in that they knew, right? That were sleeping in really uncomfortable situations. Just blew me away. We had, people that lost their homes. Just, a few days before that, completely lost their home in a fire. We had a family that was sleeping in a van that just got there were just these crazy stories of kids sleeping on pallets and sleeping on, together with 4 or 5 kids in the same bed. It was just, it was eye-opening. And that was really the moment I went, whoa, what's going on here? Like, this is happening in my town?
Was that hard for you then? Because you had one bed and you had all of these
Oh,
inquiries.
it's the hardest part of being a
Right.
chapter president is, you know, we can build beds really fast, but the applications that come in are 10 times faster. So, you're sitting here in your nice, comfortable bed at night, scrolling through these applications like I was, 12, 13 years ago, try and decide which of these kids that are without is the lucky one to get the bed. And that's a hard decision to make, because you want to give them all a bed, right?
Right. Yeah, that makes it very difficult. And yeah, I
Yeah.
understand that when we're picking charities for our different events and we have so many people that are in need and
Yeah.
there's only so much you can do. But and we'll talk about a little bit later how you now have, over 370 chapters. And I want to learn a little bit about that. But first, I want to know, can you share a story about a child or a family that was deeply impacted or reinforced
Oh,
this importance of your work?
I've got many, many. One of my favorite story is my own story about Haley, but I want to tell you a different story, simply because this shows you the need and sometimes the immediate need that we at Sleep at Emily Peace and our chapter presidents are faced with. And we always encourage all of our chapters, the 400 plus across the country, we want them to listen, keep a couple of beds in kind of an emergency, if you will, situation. And this is exactly why. So I got a call from CPS, Child Protective Services, and they talked about this family. Now, this was a brother and sister, and I can't remember, they were 6, 8, something like that, just a couple years apart, but parents were out of the picture. I think one of them was in jail and the other one died or something. And grandma and grandpa lived way, way back east, so they couldn't take the kids. So the kids were entered into foster care under the state, which happens all the time, right? Unfortunately. But the biggest problem is that they found a great family to go to, but the family only had one bed. And, the family, I don't know if they knew or didn't know that they had to have a bed for both of them, but here it comes that the judge said, listen, you know, these kids, you got to have a bed for these kids. Otherwise, I've got to split them up. You have 24 hours. Now, if you think about that, here's these two kids. Their parents are gone. Grandparents are gone. The only people they know in their life is each other, right? And they've just entered foster care. It's already traumatic. And now they're about to be split up just because they didn't have a bed. And so we got a bed to them within 12 hours. And that was just an example, an ongoing and reminder, rather, that these beds, it's more than just a bed. They don't provide just a good night's sleep for a child. They keep families together, right? They keep the confidence and security that comes from, your own family being together and sharing space together. So it was a real eye opener, and we have many examples of that.
So I want to know, how you said that you were in the Scouts, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I was what they called a young men's president in the South, you might call it a youth pastor, but don't think I'm a pastor, okay? But I was responsible for the spiritual growth and the programs, but also the physical and activity of the Boy Scouts of the boys, and that was Boy Scouts, correct?
Okay, so I can understand how you would be able to know how to build a bed, but I kind of want to know what a typical day looks like from start to finish when you're having these volunteers come in to help create these beds. So, for instance, like myself, I would have no idea what to do. So how do you make sure that it's done, efficiently, correctly, and safely, honestly,
Yeah.
for these kids?
Yeah, because a lot of the volunteers that come and build may have never touched a drill in their life, and actually, Jamie, and we tell everybody, listen, we love those. We love those volunteers because, you get the joy and the satisfaction maybe for the first time of putting something together and building something with your hands. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes from that. But, way back when, if any of you guys out there or any of those people, your listeners that have ever taught or coached or worked with the youth, as well as I do. Number one, it's hard to find an activity that doesn't involve a screen that they'll be interested in, right? Especially nowadays. And so when this came, when I discovered that this family didn't have a bed, don't kid yourself. That was one of the first things I was excited about was, here's a great opportunity to get an Xbox controller out of these Boy Scouts' hands, and let's get a drill and a sander and let's teach them something, right? Well, that's great, but we are dealing with 12, 13-year-old kids, right? So I knew I had to make the process of building this bed, although I've never built one before in my life, I knew I had to make it as simple as possible, right? Simple jigs, simple cuts, very, very, but sturdy, right? And so I took a lot of time trying to figure out what's the best construction process, what I want it to look like, so it looked good, but it was also very sturdy. But more importantly, that it was something easy to build for these Boy Scouts, something that you can't screw up. And although the process or the beds still look exactly the same as they did 14 years ago, the process of building them is a little bit different. We obviously build them a little bit quicker and probably a little more safer than we did back in the day, but yeah, we made it so simple so anybody, regardless of your experience, can come in and feel the satisfaction of grabbing a piece of wood, putting your touches on it, your fingerprints on it in whatever station you're at in the process, and moving it on to the next person. So it created what I didn't expect, but what I'm really grateful for. It created this team building exercise that is very valuable. And one thing also I'll share with you, Jamie, what I didn't realize was the value that us nonprofits need to focus in on, and that is the volunteer experience, right? And building beds for kids, well, building anything with wood is not exactly easy work, right? You're lifting 2x4s and 2x6s and moving around and cutting this and doing that. It's physically demanding, especially when you're doing 1,000 pieces of wood. So at the end of the day, you feel this. And I always felt like I was grateful for any volunteer that showed up. This is back in the day, but I didn't want them to burn out. I didn't want them to feel like, oh my gosh, this is too hard, I'm not coming back next. So I would take on all of the really heavy lifting as much as I could, right? And I'd always worry about those volunteers that worked really, really hard. Well, come to find out, and we have a saying in Sleep at Emily Peace, the happiest volunteer is the sweatiest and the dustiest. And there's a reason why that, because I learned that if you're going to take time out of your day to volunteer for an organization, right? And you want to feel like you made a difference. You want to feel like that while you were there, or if you weren't there, things wouldn't have got done. Well, with Sleeping on the Peace and building beds, you're going to feel it, number one, and you're going to realize that, yes, if you hadn't been there and if you hadn't participated and put a lot of effort into this, these kids wouldn't have beds. So it comes hard work, I guess what I'm saying, comes with a lot of fulfillment,
Very true. How did you go from this grassroots, you started in your garage with this one bed for this family, to now, I had read over 370, but you mentioned over 400 now, chapters. So tell us how did that even happen?
I got a lot of good friends. I used to say, I don't know how it happened, and there's still some of that, right? It just happened organically. We stumbled on something that was pretty unique. I learned that child bedlessness, not a real word. And also there was no solution to that problem back in 2012, or very, very few. I only found one charity in the whole country that was providing beds for kids. That was wake up call number one. And number two, when we started building beds and delivering them, showing people what we were doing, I would get calls from CPS. I'd get calls from foster care and CASA and all these other organizations that help kids. And I was like their favorite guy in the world, because finding a bed for a child for these organizations was in the top 3 hardest things for them to find, because there was nobody providing it. There was no other organization doing it. So, there's a lot of that, what I call SHP magic came to be. But really, SHP has been built on the backbones of really hard working, dedicated people, all of which had no business being in the nonprofit space. I mean, you're talking to a farm kid from Idaho, for crying out loud. We didn't know how to run a nonprofit, but what we did know was what we felt about it. And we did know that the mission meant a whole lot to us. So it wasn't like we weren't going to do it. It's just we knew it was probably going to take us a little time. although it did happen pretty quick. Yes, we have trained over 430 chapter presidents. In fact, I'm leaving this afternoon for chapter president training. We're training like 27 more starting tomorrow. We only have about 380 that are active. Some have closed, obviously, and moved. But yeah, and we're in 47 states. We're in 4 countries. And as of today, we've built and delivered over 360,000 beds.
Oh, that is very impressive. So, in your view, why is having a bed, which is something that, say, me and you and a lot of people just kind of take for granted, why do you think it's so important for a child's development?
Oh, you know, when I'll give you a story. When I first met and delivered my first bed to a little girl named Haley, right? This was a 6-year-old girl that had never slept on a bed before. She slept in the backseat of her mom's car. Now, if you think about that, just on the outlook of that, right? This child never had a sleepover. This child never woke up, fully rested. Going to school, you can imagine how attentive she was, right? Struggled with that. She didn't have friends come over. So socially, there was an issue there. Education wise and mentally, she was already behind the 8 ball because of not having a good night's sleep, right? When I first walked into Haley's room, they had just got a house. They were homeless. They just got a house. Haley showed me her room when I was delivering her bed. And the only thing in the room was a pile of clothes sitting in the corner, and that was her bed. So here's Haley, 6 years old. At least she wasn't sleeping in the backseat of her car anymore, but now she's sleeping on her school clothes, right? Just think about the psychological impact that brings. And then probably the biggest thing that I've later on realized and appreciate more is, Jamie, when you and I have a bad day, what's the one place we can't wait to dive into, right? When you're sick, you only want to crawl in bed and pass out, right? These kids don't have that, right? Think about it. Every kid gets sick. I mean, I don't know a kid that doesn't, right? How would you like to be sick and then where you go to is your pants and your shirt that you're laying on the floor? I mean, these are all things that we take for granted that we don't realize. And I tell people what I do, and of course they're shocked and they're amazed by it, and they can try to conceptualize what it would be like. But I tell you, until you're actually in the room with a child, delivering a bed to that child, you see where they slept, you see the reaction, you feel the emotion in the room. It's just really hard to express and convey what that meaning really feels like and what it means to the child and even to the parent. When I delivered that bed to Haley, she'd never slept on a bed before. When she realized what it was, she hugged these 2 strange guys, right, out of nowhere. She came up, hugged the bed, even kissed the bed, which is, I mean, think about that. That's kiss your bed. What child does that? And then if that wasn't enough to just melt your heart, you look up at mom here and 6 years of tears pouring down the single mom's face. And I was raised by a single mom too. So I knew what those tears meant. Right. And they just struck really hard to me. And so when you're in the room with these kids, right, you really feel the sense of joy, which equates to what they didn't have before. You understand how important that really is. And it's way more than a bed. In fact, I'm writing a book. I'm finishing my first book right now called More Than Just a Bed, because it is. It's way more than a bed. It's way more than a good night's sleep. It's way more than just these kids waking up refreshed. It holds families together. It brings confidence. It brings social improvement and behavioral improvement for all of these kids.
Yeah. So how do you see the future of your organization?
We're pretty steadfast and focused on our mission. No kid sleeps on the floor in our town, and we want our town to be everybody's town. So our main goal, my main mission, is to raise awareness, right? In fact, I ask your audience right now, if there's one thing that you can take away from this conversation, or one ask I would have of you, just share this podcast, share this message that child bedlessness is a real problem, right? And that you can be a part of it if you want. You can find your local chapter, because we base this all locally, right? This is a local problem and it needs to be solved locally. You can help your local chapter. You can start a chapter if you want as well. Be a part of that change. We made it very simple for people to start a chapter in their own hometown, because right now, as we speak, we have over 160,000 kids that are on our waiting list. Think about that. Almost 200,000 kids on our waiting list. And that thing just fluctuates up and down, but stays about right there the whole time. And the sad thing is, we're the largest bed building charity in the world, mostly because there's not very many, but we do build a lot of beds. We built 90,000 beds last year, but we still only cover about 27% of the United States. So even though there's 200,000 kids sleeping on the floor, statistically shows that's only a quarter of how many kids are actually in need right now. So it's a big problem.
What I liked about your organization too is that when I went online, it went directly to my local chapter.
Yep.
So we have one in Montgomery County, so it went straight to that chapter. So tell me a little bit about when I go to, say, I went to the Montgomery County chapter, what's the easiest way for someone to get involved?
Great question. And thank you for bringing that up, because, again, I'm a farm kid from Idaho. And when this did not start out to be a charity, this was just a Christmas project, right? Kind of got out of hand, by the way.
In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way, yeah. Well, we couldn't finance it ourselves, and we had people that want to donate. So we became a charity. But it's not like I didn't like charities. I just never, I was worried that when I donated or whatnot to a charity, did it just go to some pie in the sky? It helped someone 5 states over, or went to a call. I just didn't feel very comfortable that it was going to where I wanted it to go and to solve the problem I was hoping it solved. Well, if we were going to start a charity, by gosh, we were going to make sure it was as transparent. It wanted to be a charity that I would be proud to donate to. So that's what we did. And the best way to do that is we kept it local. Some farm kid from Idaho is not going to solve a child bedlessness problem in Miami, Florida. He's going to solve it in his local town, and he's going to teach someone in Miami to do it. So that's what we did. And so now when you go to any parts of Sleep in Heavenly Peace, shpbeds.org, our website, you're going to see a local feel. Yes, we're a national organization, but it's only boots on the ground. It's only made happen by the local community. So when you go to shpbeds.org, everything there is focused on your local community, your donation money, right? You can donate. Obviously, we're a charity. That's how we finance stuff, right? So 90 cents of your dollar, 90% of your dollar goes right to that chapter. We're a charity. You understand we got overhead and things that we need to pay for. So we only pull 10%. That's it. So a majority of your donation dollar stays in that community. And it's actually even more than that, because we pay for the local chapter's expenses as well with that 10%. Anyways, the beds that you build, they stay in that community, right? The time that you volunteer is to help that chapter, that core team member, the chapter president, the core team, to help the kids in your local town, right? And then, of course, if you're going to start a chapter, we teach you how to run just that chapter locally. You don't have to worry about national scale. That's what we do for you. But it's all designed to stay local. And if you want, most importantly, if you have a child, if you know of a child, if you heard of a child, whatever, you can go to shpbeds.org, and it doesn't matter which chapter page you go to, they all say the same thing. First of all, you're going to see how many kids in that chapter are still in need. You're going to see 150 kids or applications or whatever, and those numbers pretty much stay the same. But as we might deliver 50 beds, but we'll get 51 applications the next day, right? It's just kind of an ongoing thing. But when anybody goes to shpbeds.org and you know of a child that is without, you can apply for a bed for that child, either for your own child or for a child 5 states over. You know someone over there, right? Based on the zip code that child lives in, if a chapter president has accepted that area as a deliverable zip code for them, then they will get that application. If they don't, then the person filling out the application will receive an email saying, hey, apply again in 3 or 4 months. We bring on about, 15 to 20 chapters every quarter. And so, we'll get to you eventually. We're trying.
Well, how often do you guys have these building events?
hmm So that really depends on the chapter president, right? It's really up to them on what they want to do. And thank you for bringing that up, because the way we build beds is we use the community, right? We bring all the tools. We have it all organized to where you show up without any experience. We'll teach you how to run a certain station. We do them in stations, right? So in the morning, we have raw lumber, usually comes from Lowe's, our national sponsor, and we measure it, we cut it, we drill it, we assemble it. So we have this assembly line of how we take raw lumber, and in 3 or 4 hours, you'll have 30, 40 beds. And so each chapter president gets to decide how often he or she wants to build. Now, most of the time, these are team building exercises for groups, companies, organizations, whoever that want to do a team building exercise, as well as give back to the community. And we require a donation for every bed that you build. Typically, it's about $300, because that covers all the costs of bedding, mattress, delivery, the whole 9 yards, right? So if a company wants to build 20 beds, they donate $6,000, and they show up with 10 or 200 volunteers, and we put them to work, and last couple of 2-3 hours. And then at the end of the day, you got your beds ready to deliver. So some chapters build every week. Our Phoenix chapter is one of our largest ones. They build 2,000 beds a year. I mean, it's crazy. So they build every week. Some other chapters, they only build 2 or 3 times a year, and might only build 60 beds, but that's still 60 kids in that community that are now off the floor.
Mm-hmm. I was reading on your website, and you mentioned it when you were answering the question about Lowe's. So you have a partnership with Lowe's. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. Long time ago. Well, actually, when this first started, it's kind of a funny story. I built that bed with the Boy Scouts. Well, I wanted to build one with my kids, right? I had most of the wood, but I still needed some parts. So I went to a different store with a different color. And I asked for some help, right? And they were nice. I mean, they didn't. I was some guy off the street, basically, and they said they'd give me a $25 gift card, and I was like, you don't understand what I'm doing here. Well, then I went to Lowe's, and there's a guy named Lance Hoover, who was the store manager, amazing guy. He came up to me, and I told him, and you got to understand, these store managers get hit up every day, all the time, right? So the fact that he took a little bit of time out of his day to come meet with me was pretty nice. And I told him what I was doing. And he says, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you write something up for me? So I know you're not building like a fence in the back of your yard.
Right.
Fair question,
Yes.
And so I did, and I brought it back. Honestly, I don't even think he looked at it. I think he said, you know what, Luke, whatever you need, we'll just take 50% off anything you buy, which was huge. Because of that, instead of building only 5 or 6 beds that Christmas season, that first year, we built 21. And Lowe's, since then, it's been a fun story. Each Lowe's store has a certain budget, about $2,500 a year, that they get to donate. They call it the Heroes Program. They get to donate to other nonprofits. Well, as we grew as a nonprofit, and these chapters started popping up all over, well, we encouraged them to go to Lowe's and take advantage of this Heroes Project, right? Well, I want to say 2017, so about 5 years later, and I had been kind of trying to ping Lowe's corporate all the time that, hey, let's do something together, blah, blah, blah. Well, all of a sudden I get this call from Lowe's corporate, and a gal named Julie Yanachek, just an amazing gal, and she says, listen, we're sick and tired of hearing about this Sleep in Heavenly Peace project all over the country doing these Lowe's Heroes programs. I mean, we had 20 or 30 or 40, right? So it was turning their eye. Well, we just built a relationship with them, and now we're one of 6 major partners with Lowe's. In fact, right now, if you go to a Lowe's store and buy something, you know how they have the roundup at the end of the year or at the end of your purchase? We're one of the roundups. In every store nationwide. So they have been a huge supporter. They donate millions of dollars to us. In fact, coming up here in a couple of months, we're doing our second annual 24-hour build with Lowe's. That's building beds, and every hour of 24 hours. Last year, we built 5,000 beds, which is amazing. This year, our goal is 11,000. So,
oh wow,
yeah,
that's a big jump.
It's like 6,000 volunteers. It's 24 hours. It's in the basement of the Charlotte Convention Center, downtown Charlotte. It's quite a feat. It's a lot of fun. We were on Good Morning America last year. I'm sure we'll be on it this year. And it's just a testament to, not a lot of companies do that. Not a lot of companies not only invest dollars, but invest time and focus. Marvin Ellison, Bill Boltz, these pioneers of philanthropic efforts at that level are found at the Lowe's corporate office. And they're just an amazing company, always willing to give back, always thinking about the customer and the customer experience. And I know this sounds like a Lowe's sales pitch, forgive me, but they really are an amazing company. And I've dealt with a lot in this space.
Luke, before I let you go, is there anything that we haven't covered that you think someone should know?
I think we've got it. I always end the podcast again with a little bit of a ask from your audience. This only grows. We've only grown organically, right? We don't put hardly any marketing dollars to try to find chapters because we want people to come because they want to and they want to give back. So if this is something that your audience really, feels strongly about, I encourage you. You can do it. You can be a part of the solution. I mean, you're talking to a farm kid from Idaho that if you said 15 years ago, I'd have this bed building organization, I'd have laughed at you. I don't know how to build a bed. Are you kidding me? But it's these tiny moments, and I give a lot of speeches about this. Jamie, these tiny moments, we often dismiss them because we think we're too busy or we don't know how to do that or fear or whatever. We don't act on them. And I just think what would happen if I didn't stand up off that couch and go build another bed with my kids? That tiny moment that just encouraged me to stand up and go do something, go get off the couch and do something. Because of that, now we have 360 plus thousand kids that have beds and it's going to be 1 million here in just a couple of years. And that's a testament of not just this guy, but hundreds of thousands of other volunteers that have got up off the couch, that have listened to that tiny moment and followed the promptings to do what's right.
So we have mentioned your website a few times, but how can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, I'm all over social media. So, if you look up SHP Luke or Luke Mickelson, Google me. I mean, I don't know. There's only a few other Luke Mickelsons out there. I know I might be at the top of the list there, but no, follow me. I enjoy it on my social media. I am 100%, 99% SHP. I share all sorts of content. I share what's going on in the organization. I just shared last week that we reached our almost 90,000 bed build goal. It was actually only 83,000, so we just killed it, right? I share all these great stories and these stories of men and women and volunteers that are hopefully inspiring to people that are sitting at this, preferably sitting on the couch, trying to figure out what they want to do in life and how they can give back. These stories from these chapter presidents and these experiences, I hope they motivate people to get off the couch. That's why we do it, right? That's why I share it. And so find me on social media. I'd love to have you.
Yes, we will make sure to put your website and all of your social media handles on the show notes. So definitely look down for that. But, I do agree with you a lot of times. And I talk to people a lot and they want to give back and they want to do something within their community, but they just don't know how or where to go. So this, I think, is really perfect for so many families and for different organizations to get together and do something together to help someone in your community. Right. So thank you, Luke, for coming on. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Truman Charities podcast. This is one of my favorite interviews that I've done in 2026 so far. I love everything that Luke is doing with Sleep in Heavenly Peace. And I really plan to get myself and my boys involved in our local chapter in Montgomery County. So if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to rate and review our podcast. As I had mentioned before, the reviews really do count. We are a 100% volunteer-based organization. So those reviews help introduce our podcast to new listeners. If you'd like to follow us, you can follow us on Facebook at Truman Charities, Instagram at Jamie_Truman Charities, and you can follow me on LinkedIn at Jamie Truman. So you don't miss any of our upcoming events. We have our first Bethesda's Best Happy Hour in March. And then, of course, we have our first charitable event, our Derby Party, which will be the first weekend in May. Go to trumancharities.com and sign up for our newsletter so you don't miss any of our upcoming events. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Truman Charities podcast. Until next time.